The Christmas tree lights twinkled mockingly in the corner of my parents' lavish living room, casting dancing shadows across faces that had just turned cold and hostile. The festive atmosphere from moments ago had evaporated, replaced by a tension so thick it felt suffocating. "You're no longer part of this family," Dad's words hung in the air, sharp and final. He stood at the head of the dining table, his face flushed with anger, while Mom sat beside him, nervously twisting her expensive pearl necklace, the one I had given her last Christmas. I shouldn't have been surprised. The signs had been there for months, ever since I refused to join the family investment firm and instead chose to build my own company. But somehow being disowned at Christmas dinner still felt surreal. My sister Victoria sat across from me, a slight smirk playing at her lips as she held her husband Mark's hand. She had always been the perfect daughter, following Dad's every instruction, working at his firm, marrying the man he approved of. Meanwhile, I was the disappointment who dared to dream differently. "Dad, please," I started, but he cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Enough, Sarah. We've tolerated your rebellion long enough. First you refuse to join the firm, then you waste your time with this tech startup nonsense. Now we hear you're meeting with our competitors." I felt my face flush. "They're potential investors, Dad. My company is growing and we need dash." "Your company?" He scoffed. "Playing with computers in your apartment isn't a company. Victoria here manages our entire West Coast division. What do you have to show for yourself?" The truth was, my artificial intelligence company had just secured its first major contract, but I hadn't told them. They never asked, never showed interest. To them, anything outside the family firm was a waste of time. Little Emma, Victoria's 8-year-old daughter, sat quietly beside her mother, her eyes wide as she watched the drama unfold. She had always been different from the rest of them, curious, kind, understanding in a way that children sometimes are when adults lose their way. "If that's how you feel," I said, standing slowly, "then I should go." Victoria's triumphant smile grew wider. "It's for the best, Sarah. Family businesses require loyalty." I grabbed my coat from the back of my chair, fighting back tears. This wasn't how Christmas was supposed to end. The perfectly roasted turkey sat half-eaten on the table, presents still wrapped under the tree, including the ones I had brought for everyone, even though they had forgotten to get anything for me. As I turned to leave, small footsteps pattered across the hardwood floor. "Aunt Sarah, wait," Emma called out, clutching something in her tiny hands. Victoria started to rise, probably to stop her, but Emma was too quick. She reached me and thrust an envelope into my hands. "I found this in Grandpa's study while playing hide and seek last week," she whispered. "I think it's important." "Emma, get back here right now," Victoria demanded, but Emma stood her ground. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, pulling out what appeared to be old, yellowed documents. As I unfolded them, my heart stopped. "Grandpa," Emma's clear voice rang out in the sudden silence, "why is your signature on Aunt Sarah's adoption papers?" The room froze. The Christmas tree lights kept twinkling, but everything else seemed to stop. Dad's face drained of all color while Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Victoria looked as shocked as I felt. I stared at the papers in my hands, official adoption documents dated 25 years ago, bearing my father's signature and a name I didn't recognize. Catherine Mitchell. "Who is Catherine Mitchell?" I whispered, but looking at my father's face, I already knew the answer. "The woman listed as my birth mother." Dad sank heavily into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. "Where did you find those?" he demanded, but his voice had lost its authority, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. "This can't be happening," Mom murmured, tears filling her eyes. "Robert, you said those papers were destroyed." The truth that had been hidden for 25 years was finally spilling out, all because of an 8-year-old's curiosity and a game of hide and seek. "I'm adopted?" I asked, though it wasn't really a question anymore. The proof was right there in my hands, explaining so many things: why I looked different from Victoria, why I thought differently, why I never quite fit into their mold. Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Does this mean you're not really my aunt?" Before I could answer, Victoria found her voice. "Of course she is, Emma. She's still..." She trailed off, looking uncertainly at our father, my adoptive father, who sat in silence, his whole world apparently unraveling. The Christmas dinner that was supposed to end with my excommunication from the family had instead exposed a secret that would change everything. And as I stood there holding the documents that proved my entire life had been built on a carefully constructed lie, I realized this was just the beginning. The days following that explosive Christmas dinner passed in a blur. I barely registered New Year's coming and going, too consumed by the questions swirling in my mind. Who was Catherine Mitchell? Why was I given up for adoption? And most importantly, why had my parents, no, my adoptive parents, kept this secret for 25 years? I sat in my home office, surrounded by newspaper clippings and public records I'd gathered. The adoption papers Emma found had opened a door I couldn't close. Catherine Mitchell, as it turned out, wasn't hard to find. She had been a brilliant software engineer in the early days of Silicon Valley, someone who'd worked alongside the pioneers of the tech industry. My phone buzzed, another missed call from Victoria. She'd been trying to reach me since Christmas, alternating between apologizing and demanding I stop investigating. "You're going to destroy this family," her last message warned. But I couldn't stop. Not now. A knock at my door startled me. Through the peephole I saw Emma's small face peering up, Victoria standing nervously behind her. "Aunt Sarah." Emma rushed in the moment I opened the door, hugging me tightly. "Mom said we shouldn't visit, but I missed you." Victoria lingered in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Emma insisted," she explained, then noticed the research spread across my desk. Her face tightened. "You're still digging. Wouldn't you?" I challenged, leading them into my living room. Everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. "Not everything," Victoria said softly, surprising me. "You're still my sister." I laughed bitterly. "Am I?" Dad seemed pretty clear about cutting me off at Christmas. Before we knew. She trailed off, watching Emma explore my apartment. "Look, there's something you should know. After you left, Dad had a breakdown. He's been locked in his study for days, drinking. Mom's beside herself. And that's my fault?" "No, it's..." Victoria hesitated. "I found more documents. In Dad's study." My heart skipped. "What documents?" She pulled out a folder from her bag. "These are from 1998. The year before they adopted you. Dad's company was failing. He needed investors desperately. And Catherine Mitchell, she wasn't just any engineer. She was developing something revolutionary." I took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were old contracts, emails, and what looked like technical specifications for an AI algorithm, decades ahead of its time. Catherine Mitchell was working on artificial intelligence? I whispered, pieces starting to fall into place. My own inexplicable pull toward AI technology, my natural understanding of complex systems. It wasn't just coincidence. "Dad made a deal with her," Victoria continued, her voice low. "She needed funding to develop her technology. He needed to save the company. But something went wrong. There was an accident." "What kind of accident?" Victoria glanced at Emma, making sure she was out of earshot. "Catherine died in a car crash. Her patents, her research, everything went to her next of kin. Her baby daughter. Me. Dad adopted you to get control of the patents," Victoria finished. "He used them to rebuild the company. Everything we have, the success, the wealth, it's all built on Catherine's technology." The room spun. All these years I'd felt guilty for not joining the family business, for pursuing my own path in AI development. But I'd been following my birth mother's footsteps without even knowing it. "Does Mom know?" I asked. "No. She thinks they adopted you because they wanted another child. Only Dad knew the truth." Emma bounced back over, oblivious to the tension. "Aunt Sarah, what's this?" She pointed to my laptop screen, where my company's latest AI project was displayed. "That's what I've been working on, sweetie. It's a new kind of artificial intelligence." Victoria stared at the screen, then back at me. "It looks like, Sarah, these algorithms. They're similar to the ones in those old papers. Because they're evolved from them," I realized. "I've been building on Catherine's work without even knowing it. It's like it was in my DNA." The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad had adopted me to get Catherine's patents, but in doing so he'd given her work to the one person who could truly understand and advance it, her daughter. Just then my phone rang. The caller ID showed our family lawyer's number. "Sarah." He sounded urgent. "Your father is calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. He's going to announce his retirement and name his successor." Victoria's eyes widened. We both knew what this meant. In our family, succession meant everything. "I'll be there," I said, ending the call. Victoria grabbed my arm. "Sir, wait. There's something else you need to know about Catherine Mitchell's death. It wasn't just an accident." But before she could finish, Emma called out from my computer. "And Sarah, the computer says, Project Catherine is complete. My prototype AI system, named after a woman I hadn't known existed until days ago, had finished its first successful run. Tomorrow would change everything. Not just for me but for the entire family legacy built on a secret that had finally come to light." The Anderson Financial Group's headquarters loomed before me, its glass and steel structure reflecting the morning sun. For 25 years, this building had been a symbol of my family's success. Now I knew it was built on stolen dreams and buried secrets. I walked into the boardroom, the familiar scent of leather and coffee filling my nostrils. The entire board was there, 12 stern faces turned to watch me enter. Victoria sat near the head of the table, her expression unreadable. Dad stood at the window, his back to everyone. "Project Catherine is ready," I announced without preamble. Dad turned slowly, his face pale. "What did you say?" I connected my laptop to the presentation screen. "The AI system I've been developing. I named it after my birth mother, the woman whose work built this company." Murmurs rippled through the board members. Some looked confused, others uncomfortable. A few seemed to recognize Catherine's name, their faces draining of color. "This is a private family matter," Dad started, but I cut him off. "No, it's a company matter. Because everything this company is built on, every success, every breakthrough, it all started with Catherine Mitchell's original AI framework. The one you acquired when you adopted me." I pulled up the files Victoria had given me. "Catherine Mitchell didn't die in an accident, did she, Dad?" The police report Victoria found shows break tampering. "She was murdered, just days after threatening to pull her patents from your control." The room erupted in chaos. Board members started whispering, some standing to leave. Dad gripped the back of his chair, knuckles white. "You don't understand," he growled. "The company was failing. We would have lost everything. Catherine was going to pull out, take her technology elsewhere. So you had her killed?" My voice cracked. "And adopted her baby to keep control of her patents?" Victoria stood up. "Sarah, please dash." "No," I said firmly. "Everyone needs to hear this. For 25 years, this company has profited from stolen technology. But that ends today." I pressed a key on my laptop. Project Catherine hummed to life, its interface filling the screen. This is what Catherine Mitchell envisioned. I've spent years unknowingly completing my mother's work. The AI system she dreamed of, it's finally ready. And guess what? According to her original patents, which I inherited as her daughter, all rights revert to me when I turn 26. Dad's face went ashen. "Your birthday dash is tomorrow," I finished. "I own controlling interest in my mother's technology starting tomorrow. And my first act will be a complete audit of how her original work has been used." The boardroom doors burst open. Federal agents streamed in, led by a stern-faced woman who introduced herself as Agent Martinez. "Mr. Anderson," she announced, "we have a warrant to seize all company records relating to Catherine Mitchell's technology patents." Dad slumped into his chair. "How?" "I called them," Victoria said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. "When I found the police report, I couldn't live with it anymore. Sarah deserved to know the truth." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Agents combed through files, board members gave statements, and Dad was led away in handcuffs. Throughout it all, I sat in my mother's old office. Yes, it had been hers before it became Dad's, looking at her photograph on my phone. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Emma peeked in, followed by Victoria. "Is Grandpa going to jail?" Emma asked quietly. I pulled her into a hug. "Sometimes adults make really bad choices, sweetie. But that doesn't mean we stop loving them." Victoria sat beside us. "The board wants you to take over as CEO. They think it's the only way to salvage the company's reputation." I looked around the office, at the empire built on my mother's stolen dreams. "No," I said finally. "I have a better idea." 6 months later, I stood on a stage announcing the launch of the Catherine Mitchell Foundation for Women in Technology. The company had been restructured, with half its profits now funding scholarships for female engineers and developers. Project Catherine had revolutionized the industry just as my mother had envisioned. But more importantly, her story, our story, had inspired a new generation of innovators. Dad watched the ceremony from his house arrest, his trial still pending. Mom had finally found her voice, filing for divorce and starting counseling. Victoria worked beside me now, helping transform the company into something we could actually be proud of. As I finished my speech, Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Aunt Sarah, look what I made." She held up her tablet showing a simple but clever coding project. I hugged her close, tears in my eyes. Some family legacies are built on secrets and lies. But others, like the one I was building now, could be founded on truth and redemption. That Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after the truth came out, I sat in my office looking at 2 photographs. One of Catherine Mitchell, the brilliant mother I never knew, and one of Emma, the brave little girl who exposed the truth with an innocent question. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Merry Christmas, sis. Blood or not, you're stuck with me." I smiled, remembering Dad's words from last Christmas. "You're no longer part of this family." He had been right in a way. I wasn't part of that family, the one built on lies and greed. Instead, I had found something better. My own legacy, my own truth, and a chance to honor the mother whose genius lived on through me. The office Christmas tree twinkled in the corner, and this time its lights didn't feel mocking at all. They felt like hope.